Welcome to Pod Trendcast with Stella and Mark, where the world's trends take center stage.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling some really complex source material. It's focused on a, let's say, historically sensitive area, the treatment of enslaved women under early Islamic law.
That's right.
And we're using a very specific incident involving a political crisis and a particular Quranic verse as our anchor point.
Yeah, and our job here really is to carefully unpack what these historical texts are telling us, specifically about the ethical and legal questions around vulnerability, power, and justice for people who were really on the margins back then.
It's definitely heavy stuff.
It is, but the sources give us these incredibly detailed moments we need to explore.
Okay, let's start there then, this starting point. It throws us right into a tense political scene with this figure, Abdullah bin Ubayy bin Salul. He's not just some guy, is he? The sources paint him as a major leader, Khazraj tribe in Medina, really powerful.
Exactly, a local heavyweight. And the accounts, they're quite clear that Prophet Muhammad actually called him a hypocrite openly. And this is crucial.
Oh, there's a but.
There's a big but. The Prophet apparently couldn't take direct action against him, like physical punishment. Bin Salul had too much power, too much tribal backing.
So acting against him risked, what, a civil war, basically?
Pretty much. A potentially devastating revolt right when the Muslim community, the Ummah, was just getting established. That political reality, it hangs over everything that follows.
Okay, so the Prophet knows he's a hypocrite, knows he's a political problem, but the hands are tied politically. Why didn't that calculation change when, actual human suffering was involved?
Well, that is the absolute core question the sources seem to grapple with. And the suffering here was centered on Bin Salul's female slaves. He wasn't just exploiting them, he was running a whole system.
Right.
The sources focus on one woman, Musaykah. Bin Salul was forcing her and others into prostitution, offering them to guests, it says, for a price.
And it wasn't optional. The text mentioned beatings if they refused. Real physical coercion.
Absolutely. It was all about maximizing his profit with zero regard for their safety or will. And it gets even more systematic.
How so? How did he make it even more profitable?
This is what the sources call this, double profit setup. Musaykah got pregnant multiple times because of this forced situation. So Bin Salul had two ways to cash in.
Okay.
Option one, demand a big payment, like a ransom, from the child's father. Sell the rights immediately, basically.
Right.
Option two, if the father wouldn't pay up, fine. He just waited until the child was old enough, then sold the child directly on the slave market.
Wow. So he makes money from the initial exploitation and then potentially again from selling the child.
Exactly. It's a horrifying economic cycle built entirely on controlling these women's bodies and lives.
So faced with this nightmare, really, Musaykah and her mother decide they have to do something. They go to the Prophet.
Yes, but even then, the mother is deeply skeptical. The sources capture this heartbreaking doubt. Why would he help us slaves against him, this powerful man?
Understandable fear.
Totally. But they saw it as their only chance, their last hope.
Okay, so this leads to the confrontation. Musaykah's mother actually goes to the Prophet in public.
Yes, in a gathering. And she doesn't hold back. She calls the situation a festering wound. And then she asks the killer question, where's the justice for the slave girl?
So the Prophet's caught. Political pressure on one side, this direct appeal for justice on the other. What does he do?
He doesn't issue a punishment. He responds with revelation. He recites part of Qur'an 24.33 from Surah An-Nur,
Which says,
do not force your slave girls into prostitution for worldly gain when they wish to remain chaste.
okay, do not force when they wish to remain chaste.
Exactly. And the sources immediately jump on this. The women were crushed. They were expecting, a ban on the whole racket, maybe some consequences for Bin Salul.
But instead they get this qualified prohibition.
Yeah.
Only applies if they wish to remain chaste.
Yeah.
And only targets the forcing.
Right. And then the verse continues, which makes the critique even sharper. It adds, if someone is coerced, Allah is certainly all-forgiving and most merciful.
Forgiving to the coerced person.
Yes. The analysis in the source material points out that the forgiveness is offered to Musaykah, the victim. There's absolutely nothing in there about punishment or consequences for Bin Salul, the perpetrator.
So the one forcing gets nothing.
According to this critique, yes. The sources argue the verse is left deliberately, maybe intentionally vague, allows for interpretations that don't upset the power structure.
And the accusation is that the Prophet sort of Finessed it, appeared to help without actually challenging the master?
That's the harsh interpretation presented, yeah. That it was a way to seem responsive without actually delivering justice or disrupting bin Salul's rights over his property, which included Musaykah. No penalty for him.
So if the divine word didn't bring justice, what about the human legal system? Could Musaykah go to a Sharia court, accuse the men of rape,
Yeah.
testify against bin Salul?
Nope. The sources are absolutely clear on this. Her testimony as a slave woman had zero legal weight. She couldn't formally accuse anyone in a Sharia court.
Why not? What was legal reasoning?
It seems there was a pretty strong consensus among the big legal scholars back then. Names like Malik, Abu Hanifa, Shafi are mentioned.
Right, major figures.
Yeah. And their view, as reflected in commentaries like Tafsir Al-Qurtubi, was basically that a slave's testimony wasn't admissible, same as a non-Muslim's testimony or a child's.
So who could testify?
Imam Shafi is quoted saying testimony had to come from free men who were Muslim. That was the standard.
Free men, Muslim.
That's what the source indicates. And the conclusion drawn from this in the material we're looking at is stark. If your voice, your experience, counts for nothing in court.
Then you effectively don't exist legally.
Precisely. The critique frames it as slaves were not human enough to testify, which meant there was no legal path for them to challenge their owners.
That's a huge barrier. It basically seals off any avenue for justice through the courts.
It ensures the master's rights remain protected, yeah.
And those rights, the owner's rights, went really deep, didn't they? Into sexual ownership, too.
Yes, the sources state that Islamic law at the time permitted Muslim men to have sexual relations with their female slaves. The critique argues this was part of a system that, well, dehumanized them.
And it wasn't just the owner himself. The sources mention this idea of transferability, sharing.
Yeah, this is quite shocking. Texts like Tafsir Durmantha are cited, suggesting it wasn't uncommon for a man to make his slave girl halal permissible to others.
So,
To his own male slave, his son, his brother, even his father. Or, get this, send her to a guest, almost like a party favor.
wow, sent to a guest.
The sources emphasize this shows a complete lack of regard for her consent, her humanity. She's treated like an object to be passed around.
But what if she tried to build some semblance of a normal life? What if a female slave married a male slave? Did that offer any protection?
According to these texts, tragically, no. The master's ownership trumped even marriage.
It overrode the marriage.
The sources, including major ones like Sahih Bukhari and commentary by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, apparently confirm this. If the owner desired the married female slave himself,
Yeah.
it was permissible for him to just separate the married couple, dissolve her marriage, essentially, and then have intercourse with her.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to.
Because his ownership right was considered absolute, overriding her marital bond.
So any
Yeah. A two-pronged approach to make running away almost unthinkable. First layer. Physical punishment.
How severe?
Brutally severe. Owners were apparently allowed harsh penalties, potentially even death, for runaway slaves. There's a specific grim example cited.
What is it?
The companion Jarir ibn Abdullah supposedly beheaded his slave who ran away, and the commentary cited says this act was considered halal, permissible.
Permissible to kill your runaway slave. That's the physical threat. What's the second layer?
That one's psychological, or spiritual, really. It involved the threat of eternal damnation.
How so?
There is a quote attributed to the Prophet in Sunan an-Nasiyah, another collection of traditions. It says something like, if a slave runs away, no salah will be accepted from him.
Salah being the daily prayers.
Exactly, the core religious duty. So prayer's not accepted. And if he dies while escaped, he will die a disbeliever, an apostate, a kafir.
So running away didn't just risk death in this life.
It meant risking losing your faith, dying outside of Islam, and facing hell in the afterlife. A terrifying prospect for a believer.
Wow. So you're trapped physically by the threat of execution and spiritually by the threat of becoming an unbeliever.
Precisely. It's an incredibly powerful combination of deterrence. Physical chains, yes, but also these immense spiritual chains, locking people into the system.
Okay, this has been a lot to process. A really intense look at these specific source materials. The main thing that stands out is this constant tension, right, between, ideals of justice and the actual codified way enslaved women were treated. like property.
Yeah, if you pull it all together, the picture these sources paint is of a system where a woman's slave's body, her legal voice, her family ties, everything was secondary to her master's property rights.
And that was enforced through violence, legal silencing.
Exactly. Violence, having no standing in court, and then this crushing spiritual threat if you even thought about escaping.
So thinking about this for you, our listener, we've spent a lot of time on the vulnerability of female slaves here. But consider this. If the system, as described in these sources, made escape so dangerous, physically and spiritually, and made legal challenges impossible, one, what does that tell us about how much the early Muslim community, the Ummah, actually relied on slavery economically? How essential was this completely controlled, legally invisible workforce to the society's functioning?
That's a really provocative question to leave things on. How dependent was the whole structure on this institution maintained by such extreme measures? Something to definitely think about.
Thanks for listening to Pod Trendcast. Stay curious, stay questioning.